Remember, they mentioned working with think tanks and pushing for policies that could support these startup cities in Africa.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It takes a lot of courage and dedication to try to change systems that have been in place for a long time.
Yeah, but it's also incredibly inspiring to see someone who's not just complaining about the problems, they're actively working towards solutions.
And they're honest about the challenges, too. Like, they talk about how slow and frustrating it can be to work within existing political systems.
Because sometimes those systems are designed to resist change.
Yeah, I remember them using a really striking phrase to describe this. They said that a lot of developing countries have regulations for poverty.
Regulations for poverty. Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What do they mean by that?
They're saying that in many cases, the laws and policies actually make it harder for people to escape poverty.
Instead of helping them, the rules actually hold them back.
Yeah. They argue that these regulations can stifle small businesses, make it hard to attract investment, and create all these barriers that make it nearly impossible for people to improve their lives.
It's like these systems are almost rigged against the very people they're supposed to be helping.
Right. And this brings us back to that core message that runs through Aquarius's whole video, that it's not enough to simply blame outside factors like colonialism for the problems facing Africa. We need to take a hard look at what's happening internally, the systems and mindsets that are holding countries back, and then work towards solutions.
Because real change starts from within, right?
Exactly. And that shift from a victim-to-vision mentality is crucial for that process.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that even though we can't change the past, we can choose how we react to it.
Do we stay stuck in blame and resentment, or do we focus on building a better future?
And the example of Dubai, along with this startup cities concept, shows that it's possible to create incredible change even in the face of really tough circumstances.
But there's another layer to Aquarius's message that we haven't talked about yet. Something that brings all these ideas together in a really powerful way.
You mean how they connect everything back to their own personal experience?
Exactly. They don't just talk about these ideas in the abstract. They share their own story of how they applied these principles in their own life and the impact it had.
It's one thing to hear someone talk about like theories or, ideal systems.
But when they actually share how they used those ideas to make something of their own lives, it becomes way more real.
Totally. They talk about how they went all in on creating content, sharing their ideas, and building their audience.
And the results were amazing. The audience grew a ton. Their income went up. It's really cool to see.
It's a real world example of how these principles can work. Like they're saying, hey, look, I'm not just talking the talk. This stuff actually works.
And it all comes back to that victim to vision idea, right?
Yeah.
They say that letting go of that victim mentality allowed them to be creative, to see opportunities they might have missed otherwise.
It's like if you think you're limited, you probably won't even try.
But if you change your mindset, focus on what you can control, so much opens up.
Exactly. And to tie it all back, they bring up Dubai one last time.
Oh, I love the Dubai example.
They remind us that Dubai was basically nothing, just worthless land, before someone had the vision to transform it.
It shows that even in tough situations, human ingenuity and a bold vision can create something amazing.
It's inspiring, right? Reminds me of that saying, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Our beliefs shape our reality for sure. This whole deep dive exploring this video with you has been about questioning what we think about economic development.
Not just in Africa, but everywhere.
Exactly. We went beyond just blaming colonialism. We looked at economic freedom, culture, legal systems.
And that powerful idea of individual mindset, that victim to vision shift.
We've covered a ton. I feel like I'm seeing things in a whole new way.
Me too.
Yeah.
Makes you think what other factors are at play, not just in Africa, but globally.
What else helps or hurts a country's economy? And how can we, as individuals and these societies, move past blame and create a better future for everyone?
Big questions for sure. But that's what makes these deep dives so interesting, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. They get you thinking, challenging your assumptions.
If you're curious to learn more, definitely check out Aquarius Wave's full video. It's really thought-provoking, packed with ideas that'll stay with you.
A great watch. Seriously.
All right, so you've been diving deep with us into discussions on race and racism, a topic full of nuance and complexity, obviously. You're particularly interested in the concept of anti-white racism and whether it's a significant issue. And we've got a really interesting source to unpack this. A YouTube video by Aquarius Wave titled Anti-White Racism is Racism. Bold title, right?
Very direct. It suggests we're going to hear a perspective that doesn't shy away from controversy.
Absolutely. To give you some context, Aquarius Wave is a commentator. He's built a significant following by speaking very frankly, and some might say provocatively, about race. He even mentions losing a significant number of followers on one platform after expressing these views, but gaining even more on another. Clearly, this is a topic that resonates with a lot of people, even if it sparks heated debate.
That's a great point. The fact that he gained followers after making such a controversial statement speaks to a certain hunger for this type of conversation. So let's dive into what Wave actually says in this video.
He starts off with a pretty personal story. He talks about times when he witnessed harassment and bullying, but chose to stay silent, even though he knew it was wrong. It's a really vulnerable way to begin, and it made me wonder why he felt compelled to share this.
It seems like he's setting the stage for a conversation about the pressure to conform to certain narratives surrounding race, and the fear of being ostracized for speaking out against injustice, even within one's own community.
He actually says he was afraid of being labeled a sellout, which highlights a real fear that some people have when it comes to discussing race. It's like they worry about being seen as siding with the enemy or betraying their own group.
That's such an important point. This fear of speaking up is something we need to unpack because it can prevent honest and productive conversations about race.
Okay, so building on this idea of fear and silence, Wave makes a very bold claim. He argues that black people can be the most racist because there are no consequences for their racism. This immediately grabbed my attention.
That's a very provocative statement, and it demands careful examination. What's fascinating here is that it challenges a lot of conventional thinking around racism. It raises questions about what we mean by consequences. Is he talking about legal repercussions, social ostracism, something else entirely? And are certain forms of racism being minimized or ignored because of existing power dynamics?
Those are all crucial questions. And to unpack this further, Wave contrasts what he calls tangible racism with covert racism. He doesn't explicitly define these terms, but I think it's important we understand what he's getting at.
You're right. He seems to be distinguishing between overt acts of racism, like using racial slurs or engaging in discrimination, and more subtle forms of prejudice, like microaggressions or unconscious bias. While these terms have some merit, it's important to remember that even seemingly covert acts can have significant tangible consequences. For instance, microaggressions in the workplace can hinder career advancement, and implicit bias in policing can have life or death implications.
That's a great point. And it brings up an important question for you as the listener. How do you perceive the impact of both tangible and covert forms of racism? How do they manifest in your own experiences and observations? To illustrate his argument, Wave brings up some specific examples, like the Hebrew Israelites and their beliefs about white people.
It's important to contextualize this. The Hebrew Israelites hold views that are considered extreme, even within the Black community. Using such an example, while attention-grabbing, may not accurately reflect the overall sentiment of a diverse group.
It's like judging an entire religion based on the actions of a small extremist sect. Not really fair or accurate, right? But it does raise a question. How do we as a society deal with extremist viewpoints, especially when they're rooted in prejudice and hate?
That's a question that goes beyond this specific example. It requires us to grapple with the boundaries of free speech, the dangers of hate speech, and the importance of promoting tolerance and understanding.
Wave also makes a comparison between racism and tribalism in Africa, drawing on his personal experiences growing up there. He argues that the conflict and prejudice that exists between tribes is often overlooked or minimized.
While it's true that tribalism can involve prejudice and violence, it's important to avoid oversimplification. Directly comparing it to racism risks flattening the nuances of both phenomena. Racism, as we understand it in the West, is deeply intertwined with colonialism and the creation of racial hierarchies, which may not be directly applicable to all forms of intergroup conflict. We have to be cautious about making false equivalences.
It's interesting how he brings in his personal experiences to support this argument. It makes you wonder if his views on racism are shaped by witnessing different types of intergroup conflict in different cultural contexts.
You've hit on a key point. Personal experiences can be incredibly powerful in shaping our perspectives, but they can also create blind spots. It's crucial to recognize the limitations of our own individual experiences and be open to understanding the broader historical and societal forces at play.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit. Wave then tackles the legacy of slavery and its impact on present-day society. He makes a really provocative statement, suggesting that only those born before 1865 could legitimately claim to be oppressed due to historical slavery. This immediately raised some red flags for me.
This is where Wave's argument might lose some people. It's a very bold statement that disregards the concept of systemic racism, the idea that societal structures and institutions can perpetuate racial inequality, even in the absence of individual prejudice. It also ignores the very real and ongoing effects of generational trauma, which research shows can have a profound impact on individuals and communities. communities long after the initial trauma has occurred.
So even though slavery was officially abolished over 150 years ago, its effects are still deeply embedded in our society.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Imagine a tree that's been repeatedly struck by lightning. Even after the storms have passed, the tree is forever changed. It may have scars, weaknesses, and a stunted growth pattern. In a similar way, the trauma of slavery continues to shape the lives of Black people today, influencing things like wealth inequality, access to opportunities, and even health outcomes.
That's a powerful analogy, and it makes me think about how we often focus on individual acts of racism while ignoring the deeper, more systemic issues that continue to disadvantage certain groups.
To be fair to Wave, he does offer a counterargument, highlighting the success of Madame C.J. Walker, the first Black female self-made millionaire, who was born into slavery.
Yeah, I found that interesting too. He's basically saying, look, if she could overcome those obstacles and achieve success, then anyone can.
Her story is certainly inspiring and demonstrates resilience and the possibility of upward mobility. However, it's crucial to avoid using individual success stories to dismiss the systemic barriers that still exist for many Black people. One extraordinary example doesn't invalidate the lived experiences of countless others who continue to face discrimination and disadvantage because of their race.
It's like saying if one person can escape poverty, then poverty doesn't exist. It just doesn't hold up.
Exactly. It's important to celebrate individual achievements while also acknowledging the larger context. Now, in a related vein, Wave also points out that prejudice exists within racial groups as well. Using the example of colorism among Black people, he highlights how lighter-skinned Black individuals are often treated preferentially over those with darker skin tones.
This is something I've definitely seen and heard about, but I haven't fully grasped its impact. Could you shed some light on this for our listener and me?
Absolutely. This is a great example of internalized racism, where members of a marginalized group absorb and perpetuate the prejudices of the dominant culture. It's essentially a form of self-hate, where people internalize the negative stereotypes associated with their own group.
So it's not just about external forces oppressing people of color, but also about these harmful ideas taking root within those communities.
Precisely, and colorism is a prime example of this. It reflects the ways in which white standards of beauty have permeated Black communities, leading to prejudice and discrimination based on skin tone.
To bring all this together, Wave uses a personal anecdote about hating bullies from his childhood to illustrate his main point.
Okay, I'm curious about this. How does he connect bullying to racism?
He argues that standing up against what he perceives as anti-white racism is about fighting injustice. Regardless of who the perpetrator is, he's drawing a parallel between bullies picking on the weak and what he sees as a growing trend of anti-white sentiment. Essentially, he's positioning himself as the defender of the underdog, fighting back against a perceived imbalance of power.
This is a really interesting point. He seems to be framing anti-white racism through the lens of his personal experience, relating it to something that felt viscerally wrong to him, bullying. It brings up the question, is this a useful analogy, or does it oversimplify the complexities of racial dynamics? You as the listener might have some thoughts on this.
Right. And this analogy also plays into that familiar reverse racism argument, the idea that the tables have turned and white people are now the ones being discriminated.
It's important to unpack this carefully. While it's true that anyone can experience prejudice or discrimination, the concept of reverse racism often fails to acknowledge the historical and systemic power dynamics that underpin racism as we know it. Racism in the traditional sense is rooted in centuries of oppression and exploitation, resulting in deeply ingrained inequalities that continue to affect people of color today.
So, while it's important to recognize that everyone can be prejudiced, we can't ignore the historical context and power imbalances that shape how different groups experience racism.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the nuances and complexities of these issues. Now, to wrap things up, Wave brings in a spiritual dimension to his argument.
This is where he gets really philosophical. He suggests that racism has karmic repercussions, that negative actions will eventually come back to haunt the perpetrator. It's clear that he believes there's a higher moral or spiritual law at play.
This adds a fascinating layer to the discussion. It raises the question of whether there are consequences for racism beyond the realm of human law or social justice. It speaks to the moral weight that many people attach to issues of race and prejudice.
It makes you think about the bigger picture, right? Like, are there consequences beyond the immediate tangible ones?
Absolutely. And this is something that might resonate differently with different people, depending on their own spiritual or philosophical beliefs. For some, this concept of karmic justice might provide a sense of hope or solace, while others might find it irrelevant or even problematic.
It definitely adds another layer of complexity to an already complex topic.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from personal experiences to systemic issues, from tangible acts of racism to the subtler forms of prejudice. What do you see as the key takeaways from Wave's argument, and how can they help you navigate these challenging conversations?
I think what's most striking is Wave's willingness to challenge conventional narratives around racism. He's pushing back against the idea that racism is solely a white-on-black phenomenon, and arguing that prejudice can flow in multiple directions. Whether you agree with his conclusions or not, it's important to engage with this perspective and consider the implications.
Definitely thought-provoking. He's really emphasizing individual accountability, regardless of race or background. It's like he's saying everyone has the potential to be prejudiced and everyone should be held responsible for their actions.